The dust did not fall on Ashwake, it hunted. It moved in walls, in breathing curtains of ochre static that swallowed the horizon whole, and inside it, if you were unlucky, if you stayed out too long, the hollow bred things. Flickering man-shaped charges of ionized grit that the miners called wraiths, and the old Ilvain caravans called the Reaper's own children. Ashra had been running from one or the other for 3 days. Her lungs burned with grit. Her twins, no, not twins, never twins, just Rin and Wick, 7 turns and 3, born 4 seasons apart but bonded like they'd split from one heart, stumbled behind her, tethered to her wrist by a length of frayed cord so the wind couldn't take them. Mama, Wick's voice was a rasp under his breathing scarf. My legs stopped working. They haven't stopped, Ashra said, though her own hadn't much further to go either. They're only tired. Tired is not stopped. Rin said nothing. Rin hadn't said much of anything in 2 days, not since the caravan lights had shrunk to nothing behind them on the horizon and not come back. She just walked, small jaw set, one hand fisted in her mother's coat, the other dragging Wick along whenever his knees buckled. They should not have survived the caravan's leaving. That had been the clan elder's quiet calculation, unspoken but understood. An unchosen mother seems had gone fully dark 11 days after her mate died in the long collapse, and dark seems meant she could no longer sing into the choirnet that kept the caravan synced through storm season. A woman who couldn't hear the network coming couldn't be trusted to keep her children alive through it. So, kinder, in the elder's eyes, to leave her at the reclamation line where the human outposts were, than to let a dark-marked family slow the whole caravan into a wraith's path. Kinder, Ashra almost laughed, if laughing hadn't cost breath she didn't have. Then the light came. Not storm light, not wraith static. A square of warm yellow cutting clean through the ochre haze, a door thrown open, and a broad shape stepped out into the wind like it wasn't afraid of what the wind carried. Hey, a man's voice, rough human, close enough now that she could see him shielding his eyes against the grit. Hey, there's people out here. Rin moved before Ashra could stop her. Small and fast and done, apparently, with being quiet, she broke from her mother's side and half ran, half fell toward the light, dragging her breathing scarf down so her voice would carry. Please, Rin's voice cracked on the word, 7 years old and carrying the whole weight of the last 3 days in it. Please, my mom, she can't walk anymore, please. The man didn't hesitate. Ashra would remember that later as the first true thing she learned about him. He didn't hesitate. He crossed the distance in a dead run, scooped Rin up against one hip like she weighed nothing, and was kneeling in front of Ashra and Wick before the next gust hit. Up close his eyes were a startling storm gray, narrowed hard against the wind, and there was no calculation in them at all. Just urgency. Can you stand? Don't answer, doesn't matter. He was already pulling Wick free of the cord, tucking the boy inside his own storm coat in one motion. Arm around my neck. Now, we are not doing this out here. She didn't remember much after that. The dome door sealing behind them with a hiss that cut the wind to silence. The impossible stillness of filtered air, the way the floor came up to meet her. Her last clear thought before the dark took her was small and stupid and impossible to let go of. Please don't let this be another kind of cruelty. She woke to quiet. Not storm quiet, which was its own kind of held breath. Real quiet. A low hum of machinery somewhere beneath her, filtered air moving soft against her face, and she registered it with a jolt that snapped her fully upright, no wind screaming outside at all. Easy, the voice again, rough, low, closer than she expected. You're all right, kids are fine, they're right there. She followed the tilt of his chin and her chest cracked open with relief. Wick was curled on a low couch under a blanket 3 sizes too large for him, snoring the unbothered snore of a 3-year-old who had decided, somewhere in the last hour, that the crisis was over. Rin sat upright beside him, awake, alert, watching Ashra with the same careful, unreadable eyes she'd had since the caravan left them behind. They're safe, the man said again, like he understood that was the only sentence that mattered right now. I'm Dane. Station's mine, water reclamation mostly, some storm relay work on the side. You three picked a hell of a week to be outside. Ashra's throat was sand. We did not pick it. Something shifted in his face. Not surprise exactly, recognition of a thing he already suspected. Yeah, he said quietly, figured. She pulled the blanket tighter Evers. Why instinct she'd built across 11 dark-seamed days, telling her to be ready to run, to negotiate, to brace for the price of this kindness. What do you want? She said, and hated how her voice shook on it. Dane blinked, then let out a short, disbelieving breath. What do I want? He gestured at the room, at the two sleeping, one watching children, at the blanket, at all of it. Lady, I've been up half the night making sure your kid didn't lose fingers to frostbite from the cold snap and the other one didn't choke on grit cough. If I wanted something from you, I'd have asked by now. It was the simplicity of it that undid her. No one gave without a price. Not on the caravan, not in the clan's long memory, not ever. But this man said it like it was obvious, like generosity without a hook was the default and not the exception, and she had no framework at all for what to do with that. You don't have to trust me, Dane added, softer, rubbing the back of his neck like the conversation cost him something too. I wouldn't in your spot, but you're inside now and so are they, and that's not changing tonight regardless of what you decide about me. He left her a mug of something hot and vaguely bitter, and retreated to give her space, another thing she filed away, confused. He noticed I needed space, and he gave it without being asked. It was Wick who broke the tension the next morning, the way only a 3-year-old could. He woke, blinked at the dome's curved ceiling, and gasped so loudly Rin nearly fell off the couch. Mama, mama, the ceiling is breathing. It was, in fact, just the dome's climate vents cycling, a soft mechanical pulse of intake and release. Rin, exhausted past patience, groaned into her hands. It's not breathing, Wick, it's a machine. It's breathing at me. Dane, passing through with a mug of his own, didn't even look up. It'll do that, don't poke it, it bites. Wick's small hands shot behind his back so fast Ashra nearly laughed for the first time in longer than she could remember. He spent the rest of the morning eyeing the vent with deep, personal suspicion, as though daring it to make the first move. She hadn't known how badly she needed to watch her children be ridiculous again instead of just surviving, until she got to watch it happen. Dane didn't ask her to leave, days passed, and he simply continued. Fixed relay lines, logged storm data, made too much food and left the extra where she could reach it without asking, never touched her, never crowded her. Watched her sometimes, though, in a way that wasn't hunger and wasn't pity, but something closer to a man trying to work out a puzzle he hadn't meant to pick up. It was Rin who noticed first. Of course it was Rin who noticed everything and said almost none of it. You watch him too, Rin said one evening, apropos of nothing. From where she sat cross-legged on the floor with a strange little wire puzzle Dane had handed her without comment 3 days prior. Ashra's hands stilled on the seam of Wick's torn sleeve. I do not know what you mean. Rin didn't push. She just went back to her puzzle, entirely too knowing for 7 years old, and let the silence do the arguing for her. The truth was, Ashra had started studying his equipment more than she'd admit, not out of nosiness. But because engineering was the one language she still spoke fluently, the one part of herself the clan hadn't managed to hollow out. She found him one night, elbow-deep in a fried storm relay coupler, swearing quietly at a burnt circuit board. You are doing that wrong, she said before she could stop herself. Dane looked up, startled then amused. Oh yeah. The secondary coil is drawing current the primary can't shed fast enough. It will fry again in a week. She stepped closer, hands hovering over the housing with an old, aching familiarity. May I? He handed her the tool without a word. It took her 40 minutes to rebuild what had taken him 3 failed attempts across 2 weeks. When she finally straightened, Wiping grit from her hands, Dane was staring at her like she'd performed a miracle instead of basic thermal load balancing. I was a caravan atmospheric engineer, she admitted, quiet. Before, I kept the storm shield synced for 400 people. 400, he whistled low. And here I thought I was doing you a favor letting you touch my junk piles. You are doing me a favor, she said. This is only how I say thank you in a language that is mine. Something passed between them then, not spoken, not named, but real. Wick, watching from the doorway with a mouthful of ration bar, announced to no one in particular. Mama's magic, and Dane, without missing a beat, said, "She's not magic, kid, she's just smarter than me," and Wick considered this with grave seriousness and concluded, "Smart is basically magic," and Dane, Ashra would remember this too, laughed, really laughed for what low. Oaked like the first time in longer than her own 11 dark days. She learned slowly that his solitude wasn't an accident either. Had a sister, Dane said one night, not looking at her, both of them watching storm static crawl harmlessly across the dome's outer shell. Ran a relay station 2 ridges over. Long Hollow took it 4 years back. I was supposed to be there that week, wasn't. He turned his mug in his hands. Been out here alone since. Figured it was safer for everyone if I stopped being anyone's supposed to. Ashra understood that particular grief better than she wanted to. You built a wall, she said. The same as you. Yes, she looked at her own hands, at the seams along her wrists that had gone the flat, lightless gray of ash 11 days after Joro died and never once flickered since. Mine used to glow when I felt something strong enough to share. Now it is only, she turned her wrist over, showing him the dead gray lines, this, my people call it unchosen. It means I can no longer be heard. Dane reached out slow, giving her every chance to pull away, and rested 2 fingers featherlight against the darkened seam on her wrist. I can hear you fine, he said. Her breath caught somewhere it had no business catching. And then faint, so faint she almost didn't trust her own eyes, a single hairline seam under his fingers flickered. Gold, barely there, gone again in a blink. Dane went very still, did that justice. I don't know, Ashra whispered, staring at her own wrist like it belonged to a stranger. It has not done that since Joro. Neither of them said anything else that night. They didn't need to. It was enough for now to sit in the quiet with 2 people's grief finally speaking the same faint, flickering language. The storm that came 3 weeks later had a name before it even arrived, because the relay towers had never recorded pressure numbers like it. The Long Hollow. Colony-wide evacuation to shelter cores. Every reclamation station running triple redundant to keep breathable air moving through the dust. Dane's primary coupler, the one Ashra had rebuilt and reinforced twice since held. His backup did not. At the worst of it, with Wick sobbing into Rin's shoulder in the shelter alcove and the whole dome groaning under wraith static pressure, the station's secondary air cycler began to fail. Human tech had no answer for a load collapse this size. Ashra's did. Storm shield resonance dampening, she said, already moving, already pulling wire and coil from the emergency kit with hands that hadn't shaken this steady in 11 years. It is caravan technology, you would not have it. I do. She rebuilt the failing cycler's core in 19 minutes, hardwiring in a resonance pattern from clan memory she hadn't touched since Joro was alive to help her run it. When the dome held, when the screaming pressure alarms finally cut to silence, Dane looked at her like the ground had shifted permanently under his feet. It had barely stopped screaming outside when the second knock came. Not wraith static. A hand. 3 Ilvain figures at the dome's outer lock, seams glowing steady clan gold even through the settling dust. A delegation, sent the moment the caravan's own instruments registered the Long Hollow scale and realized their storm shield tech alone might not survive it either. Ashra Ven, the lead elder's voice was flat through the comm relay, no warmth in it, only need. The choir requires your knowledge, return with us and your mark will be lifted. You will be chosen again. It should have been everything she'd begged for once, in a frozen doorway with nothing left to lose. She looked at Rin's white-knuckled grip on Wick's hand, at Dane, standing beside her without a single word of pressure either way, letting this be entirely hers to choose. "I will share the shield pattern with the caravan," Ashra said, steady. "Every family deserves to survive the Hollow, but I am not coming back to be chosen by people who left my children in the dust." Her wrist flickered faint gold and did not fade this time. "I am already chosen. I chose it myself." The elders left with the shield schematics and nothing else, and Ashwake's long hollow passed into local legend as the storm that should have taken the reclamation line and didn't. Mornings after were quieter, but not the old quiet, not the held breath kind. Wick had declared war on a new opponent, the kitchen's ration warmer, convinced it was definitely alive and definitely rude. And Rin had stopped watching doorways like they might swallow her family whole. She'd started instead tinkering at Dane's workbench with the same small, fierce concentration her mother wore over a fried coupler. Ashra stood at the sink one evening, hands in warm water, and felt Dane come up quiet behind her, not touching, just close, the way he always gave her the choice to close the distance herself. She turned, closed at herself. Under her fingers, where they met his, both their seams, hers gold-lit for the first time in 11 years. His own newly discovered ones flickering to answer hers glowed together, soft and steady, in a language that belonged to no clan and no choir but the one they'd built themselves. Wire by wire, quiet kindness by quiet kindness. "Told you," Dane murmured, "you're not alone anymore." Behind them, Wick's triumphant shriek rang out, "I won, warmer, I won," and Rin's tired, fond groan followed half a second later. And Ashra let herself believe fully for the first time since the dust took everything from her. She had not just been given shelter. She had found a home.